Dodgers are dodgering again. It's Monday, January 20th. Happy Monday. Jack Aram, Just Baseball Show. As always, it is presented by the fine folks at BetMGM. Folks, wherever you're listening or watching, be sure to like, subscribe, do whatever you got to do to make sure that we populate on your feed again. Unfortunately, that's not TikTok right now, although we'll see what happens. It's been a weird 24 hours. We also got to talk about the top 10 catchers in Major League Baseball. But it's all going to start with Sasaki, and then we're going to get to Tanner Scott, and then we're going to get to the backstops in Major League Baseball. How pissed are you right now, scale of 1 to 10?
I'm not pissed. This one was a little annoying.
Yeah.
I would say a little
Which
annoying.
one? Because we got two. We got to talk about Sasaki on
So
Friday, Scott on Sunday.
Sasaki didn't annoy me, and I'll
Yeah.
actually make my case for that. I think that there's no better litmus test than every team basically being forced to only be able to offer the same amount of money for a guy
Yeah.
and have him pick where he wants to go from there.
Right.
Obviously, there's some other factors that could, skew into the Dodgers' favor. Tanner Scott was annoying on multiple fronts.
Yeah.
I think a lot of other teams could have topped that, but also it's like Tanner, you just want to go to the Dodgers and and keep this thing going. I'm glad
Right.
he got paid. Think about this: is a guy that 5 years ago, was kind of just shipped over to the Marlins, and even I mean the first year with the Marlins, it was really rough, and like to see where he's at now, and now making that generational money, like that's
Yeah.
just such a cool part about baseball is you can just find something and it goes from there, find a new angle. Fastball's outrageous, slider's outrageous, and now he's got 70 plus $1 million. But that one bothered me a little bit more because it was just this is where it was like full fledged unnecessary. Like this is just the Dodgers dodgering, and I can understand fans getting pretty annoyed with this one because this is just literally putting more money on the table than everybody else did for what I deem like high priced relievers as like a luxury at that point.
Yeah.
Like this was just flexing their muscles on the ultimate luxury that they didn't really need.
I saw the Bob Nightingale report that the Red Sox apparently offered more years and more AAV, but Rob Bradford immediately shot that down and said that is not true. I saw Jesse Rogers say that effectively the silver and bronze in the Tanner Scott sweepstakes went to the Cubs and the Blue Jays, which
Of
sucks
course, the
for
Blue Jays.
Toronto. I'm sorry, Blue
Blue
Jays
Jays are
fans.
leading the league in bronze medals this year, man.
I
I,
mean, they
I
got
feel
the
so bad
silver in
for.
Sasaki.
Yeah, they did get the silver for Sasaki. Congratulations. I feel really bad for Blue Jays fans there, and I think there's a certain point where you do need to look at. And I feel like I've just been teeing off on Ross Atkins all offseason, but there has to be a certain point where you look in the mirror or just look at Ross Atkins and say,
Yeah,
why are we the runners up or the finalists every single time? Because I at least appreciate them trying. I'll take
right.
that over what a lot of other teams are doing right now. But this is also another wrinkle in it. It's not just the money, it's also convincing these players that they are not going to send themselves to Siberia by signing a long term deal with you. And I don't think any player can fully be convinced that they are not potentially signing a deal that'll put them in a bad situation for a long time if they sign a deal with the Blue Jays. Your franchise player might be gone the
Right.
next year. All of your pitchers are aging a little bit. You have a lot of positions completely unknown. Like I think it's very fair for players to say, what am I getting into here if I go to the Blue Jays? And I think that's why they can't finish the mission right now. And that's the money part is
Yeah.
the leader, but there's still another 30% of it at least that is what's the situation like?
Right. I want to make sure people don't interpret you saying Siberia as Toronto sucks as a place because Toronto's one of my favorite
Oh no,
cities
no,
in the
Toronto's
world.
one of the best cities. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah,
Toronto's one of the best cities out there. I absolutely love that place. Baseball Siberia, I should
yeah,
say. Like
right. It's
you
you go up there and you have this disconnect because you're not in the United States, you're in Canada, and like Toronto is as American a feel as you possibly have in Canada. And who knows what happens over the next couple months? Apparently, we're in the running for Greenland right now, but like we're looking at a fan base that could be watching a team that's paying a ton of money to finish fourth in the American League East for the next 8 years. And I think that's what you really mean by this, especially if they miss out on Vladdy. What is Bo Bichette? Is he a .5 WAR player? Like this is where we're at with them. And what does Bregman actually do for the Blue Jays? What does Santander actually do for the Blue Jays if Vladdy is gone? And like, what does Gosman and Barrios actually do if Vladdy's gone? So I feel like that's what you mean by Siberia, where they may just lack a direction for a long time if this doesn't work with Vladdy and with the big ticket free agents that they're whiffing on right now.
100%. I think there's a few teams that I put in that like Siberia like
Yeah,
category where it's just you are jumping into uncertainty. And I think that's why like Juan Soto really made it public and clear his process there of like, I want the pitch on player development because this is as unique as it gets, right? This
right,
is over a decade where he's signing a deal, but all of these other deals are half decade, and that's still a decent amount of time. And it's your prime years. Where are you going? I think the Jays can make this thing competitive sooner rather than later, but you can't just do it through free agency. The player development pipeline stinks. And if you're the one player that breaks the mold and says, you know what, I'm going to sign with the Jays, you're going to look at all the other people that haven't and say, well, why haven't they?
right,
And is anybody else going to come over after? If it's just me, am I breaking the seal or am I just going to be the one exception? And
right.
if you're the one exception, you're alone in Siberia. So
Yeah.
like that's where it's at for me. So I hope the Jays can finish the drill, but the reality is you need to retain your talent
Hmm.
and develop your own talent, and then I think you'll be able to land guys, and that segues into the Dodgers conversation
Right.
too, which is yes, they have signed a bunch of guys and they have acquired a bunch of players, but also those players are very happy to go there because
Right.
they know that they are going to continue to develop players to help that core and supplement, and they also are going to spend when they need to and be able to convince people to come because it's the best situation from a development standpoint, from just a winning standpoint.
Yeah, I think this transitions best into the Sasaki
Yep,
conversation because
no
the
doubt.
report from The Athletic that I read on Sunday morning was that the Padres were willing to max out their IFA bonus pool. They were willing to give Roki Sasaki $10 million plus to become a San Diego Padre. But Sasaki opted for the LA Dodgers, where he joins two countrymen in Otani and Yamamoto, and he did it for $6.5 million. So a guy that is going to make the league minimum for his first 3 years of Major League Baseball opted to take the deal that was effectively $3.5 million cheaper, and you do that because you know that they are second to none when it comes to player development. They are clearly second to none when it comes to player acquisition. And they just won the World Series, man. And they have two guys that you played in the World Baseball Classic with. There was not a better situation for him. And unfortunately, shame on me for thinking that he wanted to be the front man somewhere. I think he's perfectly fine being a cog in the machine that is going to be well oiled for the next decade.
It's funny because I think people are like saying, well, this process never ended up being a process. It was a farce, blah, blah, blah. I
It was
don't
a
think so.
process.
I
It was a
really don't.
process.
I think it was absolutely a process. And I think the Dodgers realized that they had to pull out some of the stops. And like, I don't think the Dodgers were going to do all the things that they did there with like the multiple meetings. And also, I think there's another wrinkle in this where I wanted to like complain and say, well, I thought he didn't want stars at the meeting and this and that. Well, those are all reported things. If it doesn't
Right.
really come from Sasaki or his agent, like the only thing that came from Sasaki's agent was the big market thing.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was a little bit to just say like, hey, well, he not a big market may not necessarily be the best place for him. That did kind of feel like, hey, this is a very open process, and
Yeah.
it felt like a little bit forced there. But at the same time, like I do genuinely think that he meant that based on a lot of the things that I've heard from scouts and people about the way that he struggled at times with the pressure and the media and just being the guy out there in Japan. And so like I don't necessarily disagree that a small market may have been better for him, but I think the priority here is it's a guy who last year after arm issues, shoulder issues specifically, the way that he was delivering pitches changed a little bit. The angle changed a little bit. He lost a tick on the fastball a little bit more. He lost multiple inches of vert, and his slider was completely different. You now grab a Major League Baseball where you are going to lose even more movement on your fastball.
Yeah.
And there is a very large importance here on being able to regain that fastball quality. If I need to go to a place that's going to help me optimize my arsenal, it's the Los Angeles Dodgers. There's other teams there for sure, but it's the Los. If I'm going to a place from a development standpoint that's going to give me the best shot to win, forget winning a World Series, forget everything else. Treat me like a prospect. If you told me I have to pick the place that's going to get me the best chance to maximize my potential, I'm picking the Los Angeles Dodgers. And
Yeah.
that's been long discussed based on the resources they give their players, based on the amount of money that they spend into development. And Roki Sasaki is going to have his own department probably helping him
Yeah.
develop. And that's a difference there, right? So I am annoyed with Tanner Scott, and that's a whole different conversation that
Yeah.
we'll get into. But I thought the Sasaki thing was as clear of just a litmus test of what is the best situation beyond winning World Series, financials, all of that for a player to want to go to when every team at the end of the day can only offer pretty much the same thing.
Right.
And it's one of those spots where he's going to go and pitch wherever he wants to pitch, and he's going to get opportunities. He's going to get innings no matter what. Who's going to help him be the best version of Roki Sasaki?
Yeah.
And I think through that entire process, he settled on the Dodgers. And this is even more important for him because remember, if he stayed in Japan for a couple more years, then he would have been able to come over and get the Yamamoto contract. He
Right.
didn't do that so that he could potentially hit free agency younger now and then get his big deal in Major League Baseball. So he needs to reach his potential in the next few years to then reach that earning potential as well. So that's why it became even more important from a development standpoint.
There are a lot of starting pitchers that fit that description, what you're talking about of having an arsenal optimized and particularly a fastball. Like getting back to your fastball, there are some young arms that have come over to LA and experienced like this rejuvenation with their four seam fastball. I'm going to point to one guy last year. Like there was an immediate change with Kopech when he got there. Like
Oh,
Michael
yeah.
Kopech was not that good with the White Sox, and he was a throw in that Edmund Fetty 3 team deal. He comes over and his fastball legitimately looked different. There was a little tweak, whether it came from Mark Pryor or whether it came from somebody else with the LA Dodgers that made his fastball better. I'm also thinking about Yency Almonte from a couple years ago. That guy stunk out loud with the Colorado Rockies. He comes over and he effectively nets them Jackson Ferris and Zaire Hope with Michael Bush, who was a blocked prospect. Like the Dodgers can do this with
Mm-hmm.
guys. And you take somebody of Almonte's ability and Kopech's ability. I mean, that's the kiddie pool compared to Sasaki's ability.
Yep. Yep. And that's the craziest part. So yeah, you see all those examples, you see all those versions of players really getting more out of them, and why would you not want to follow suit? And it's not just that, it's not just the fastball quality for Sasaki. He needs a third pitch.
Yeah.
Like that breaking ball needs to be reworked. It is two completely separate pitches from 23 and 24.
Yeah.
That splitter is elite, but he was cutting it more in 24 where it wasn't cutting as much in 23. What's the better version there? Also, there's a guy that, and this is not where the Dodgers are necessarily going to help because I don't think anybody can help at this point. He has not thrown more than 130 innings. And I think that's the other side of things that people are missing here. Like, yes, it is annoying that a supremely talented pitcher is now joining a list of supremely talented pitchers, but I don't think that he just instantly elevates this rotation to like unbelievable. It already is a really, really good rotation, but there is a legitimate risk that his fastball gets hit hard if it doesn't. If he goes into 2025 with the same fastball, it will get hit hard. I feel very confident about that. I think he will find a different fastball. I think that's a clear priority. But that said, like there's some questions with the arsenal, and there's significant questions about being able to handle workload. The
Yeah.
upside is there, but I don't think he's a guy that's going to like be grabbing the number 2 spot in the rotation next year.
No.
Like we were talking about it, like if we were ranking top 30 pitchers with Sasaki in there, yeah, we didn't consider him for our top pitchers rankings, but I don't think he would have sat in the top 30 for me yet because I just think there's too much unknown. I like Glass now is an elevated version of that right now, where you're getting about 130 innings, but he's proven it on the big league side and has multiple pitches that already play at an elite level.
I'm pulling up my top 35, I think. I ranked 1 through 35. No, 1 through 30. So I'm pulling up my number 30, and I want you to like make the case for him. I've got Hunter Brown at 30. Like there's a pretty good chance I think that Hunter Brown is legitimately better than
Yeah.
Roki Sasaki in 2025. I'm looking in my mid to high 20s like Sean Manaea. You're putting Sasaki over Sean Manaea right now? You're putting
For
him over
next
Seth.
year, for next year, no.
No,
No.
like Seth Lugo, Tanner Bybee. Shit, Shane McClanahan is 24 for me coming off TJ. I have far more confidence in McClanahan coming off TJ than Sasaki dealing with a shoulder thing.
McClanahan's innings limit is going to be probably right around Sasaki's career high. So like again, this is not a bash on Sasaki. He could end up becoming one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball in a couple years.
Yeah.
But this is a developmental thing here. And they're not going to just throw him to the wolves right away. You need fastball shape to improve. You need a third pitch,
Yeah.
and you need the velocity to come back, and you need to be able to stay healthy. Oblique issue, shoulder issue. When he was drafted number one overall, they shut him down immediately to protect him because he
Yeah.
was having some issues before that. I think in high school, it was like he infamously was not thrown in a big spot because his coach wanted to protect him, which you never hear about
Ever.
in Japan. It's always go
Ever.
out there and throw, baby. And yeah, I think this is something that he has dealt with for pretty much his entire baseball life. So it's a concern for sure. And at 6.5 million, whatever it is, like you don't care at all. But again,
Right.
I don't think this is like, oh, he's grabbing the spot, in number two in the rotation, and that he's going to be a Cy Young contender. Like, if you put money on Sasaki to win Cy Young, like use the promo code Just Baseball because you'll get that money back in bonus bets. That shit ain't hidden.
So, like, you've got at the top clearly Snell, Glasnow, Yamamoto, Otani, and then it's a fight for the five. And there was a really great article put out by Eric Truden at justbaseball.com about Clayton Kershaw's future now. And Kershaw, like, he may not be in this Dodgers starting rotation. Hell, he could be, but Sasaki probably pushes out a Tony Gonsolin or a Bobby Miller or a Dustin May coming off of the injuries that he's had, including, I think, a bone from salmon that cut up his esophagus.
Is that what they ended up saying it was? I had no idea what it was ultimately that had like ruptured his esophagus. What a nightmare that is.
Yeah, I think it wasn't a properly deboned fish. That sucks.
Oh,
But like we're talking about Sasaki beating out Gonsolin and May. Sasaki is not yet in the conversation of Glasnow, Otani, Yamamoto, Snell. He's not close to that conversation right now.
yeah. No doubt. And Glass now is hurt at the end of last year, so we'll see
Yeah.
how it looks. I think Snell is the big game changer because Snell is a guy that with this way the stuff has looked and the shapes and everything, like I think he's a Cy Young contender. I think the way Yamamoto looked at the end of the year, I think he's a Cy Young contender. And then
Oh,
a healthy Glass now is too. But at the end of the day, like we see him get to this 130 mark every year, and then the wheels kind of fall off. So that's the question. But I think that's part of the reason why they're just going to have next man up, next man up, next man
yeah.
up, and just keep plugging guys in there. And now they've bolstered the bullpen to elite levels again, which is
It,
the annoying part as well.
and I can't believe I'm saying this, but don't forget how good of a pitcher Shohei Otani is. Like this
Yeah,
guy
I
off
keep I
of the
keep
Braves.
forgetting that they're going to throw him in there as well. But like another guy though coming off double elbow surgery, we'll see how it all looks. Like they have a lot of irons in the fire,
Yeah.
but they need a lot of irons in the fire to be this like perfect rotation that everybody's dreaming on. Of course, if it falls off after three, they're still going to be elite.
Yeah.
But I it's very fun to put the rotation together on paper, and I hate just doomsdaying injuries,
Yeah,
but
but
you can
we'll
pretty much
check
just
in
pick off one
September.
player at a time and
Right.
say like, and you could say every team deals with it, but it's been pretty significant on the Dodgers side.
Yeah. So it was clearly a player development decision from Roki Sasaki to pick the Dodgers. I want to tie a bow on the financial because that kind of bridges me into Tanner Scott. It didn't need to be a financial decision for Roki Sasaki because he is not your typical international free agent signing. Like a lot of guys will take the biggest number thrown at them, and clearly the Padres threw the biggest number at him. It doesn't really matter for him because he has a ton of endorsement money from Japan. He's a star. He's already a global superstar. He like the difference between 6.5 and 10 between the Dodgers and Padres was going to be negligible for him. But this kind of takes me into the Tanner Scott conversation because I have a theory on why the Dodgers can keep doing this to the point where it's really annoying for the overwhelming majority of baseball fans. And I'm going to rant a little bit here. And I spent a lot of Sunday morning reading Forbes and the LA Times and gathering pertinent information here. So just bear with me. And I'm going to throw a bunch of factoids at you, and it's all going to result in a final picture. I think the reason the Dodgers can do all of this is because they paid the right guy $700 million. dollars. I think it all stems from Shohei Otani. And I hate to throw shade at the New York Mets, but I was pretty vocal about that. I think they paid the wrong guy $765 million dollars because he's a really good hitter. He might be a top five hitter on the planet, top three hitter on the planet. but he's not a global phenomenon like the guy that the Dodgers paid $700 million to. Per Forbes, the Dodgers added 12 Japanese based partners and a total of $70 million in incremental sponsorship in 2024. That included multi year deals with All Nippon Airways, which is effectively Delta in Japan, Toyo Tires, Koa, Daiso, Yakult, etc. From the LA Times, Japanese tourism officials have informed the Dodgers that more than 80% of people who visit Los Angeles from Japan go to Dodger Stadium during their trip. Add in that they paid Shohei Ohtani $2 million in salary last year. The tax number's 46, but who gives a shit? And they paid Yamamoto $9.2 million in salary. Two players they paid in salary in 2024 $11.2 million, and it got you $70 million worth of unique Japanese based partners. This is not accounting for the gate. This is not accounting for merchandise, for concessions, for viewership, nothing. It's just multi year sponsorship deals signed directly with the LA Dodgers. This is not accounting for signing bonuses, but when you're likely pulling well north of $100 million in unexpected profit 2 years ago and you're trying to forecast, who effing cares? Like,
Yeah.
including the tax bill, the Dodgers spent $442 million on the roster last year. It was an $100 million tax bill. Major League Baseball's league wide revenue in 2023 was $11.6 billion, which was a 10% increase from 2022. We haven't seen the 24 number, but guess what changed in 24 that didn't exist in 23? Shohei Ohtani being on the LA Dodgers. Initial forecasts of Ohtani from the Dodgers were that he was going to net them around $100 million a year in unexpected profit. And everything I read makes me think that they really lowballed that expectation.
Yeah.
They found this windfall that is never before seen because of an athlete, and they can pay whoever the heck they want now.
Yep. Yep. And it highlights it really well. And we talked about it in terms of, when the signing went down, it's like, oh, this money's outrageous, but they're going to cover at least a good portion of it on the market that they're able to tap into. Do we ever foresee it being to this degree?
No.
I don't know, because clearly the
they
Dodgers
didn't.
didn't either. But this is the business side of it, right? And this is where, you know, other teams that maybe could have competed in that realm, you want to try to beat that number. But apparently, like the Blue Jays, that they did come in at 700, right? And some other teams did come in at very competitive numbers, I think, modeling it out and saying, hey, we can make money here too. And again, I think that's where it's like the 70-30 thing. 70% of it or 80% of it's going to be money. Then 20 to 30% of it's going to be the situation.
Yep.
And at that point, again, Ohtani signing a very, very long-term deal, picking the spot where he knows they're going to consistently be winners, and then even deferring that money so that they can facilitate building that team around him, which they had already had that team put there based on really good decisions that they had made, right? The Red Sox, who should have never traded Mookie Betts, but knew that they weren't going to be able to pay him for whatever reason. I have no idea why the Red Sox would not be able to afford a Mookie Betts, traded him, and the Dodgers jumped on that opportunity. Freddie Freeman, I probably could have stayed in Atlanta if they.
Atlanta had every opportunity to pay Freddie Freeman.
Yeah, and they didn't. They did the next best thing possible, right? They go out and make a trade and extend Matt Olson. But what have we found out in the last couple of years? Matt Olson ain't Freddie Freeman. He's really damn good. He ain't Freddie Freeman.
Right.
So, like, those are the Dodgers capitalizing on two teams that have every ability to spend, not spending on their star and saying, fine, we'll take him. I can understand the other instances being really annoying and Tanner Scott annoying, but you can't blame the Dodgers for the Mookie thing. You can't blame the Dodgers for the Freddie thing. And that's a big reason why they are such a great destination.
Well, and they saw the ability to immediately profit on Ohtani as well. So I'm not going to get annoyed with the LA Dodgers on Ohtani whatsoever. And then you look around that diamond, Will Smith, they ID'd out of the University of Louisville. They took him with a first round pick and they paid him 10 years, $140 million. I can't be upset with that. He's a top 5 catcher in baseball. Muncy is effectively a homegrown talent. I know
he was DFA, dude. He was bouncing around.
Tommy Edman, dude, they just acquired via trade and they extended him. I'm fine with that because he was not deemed necessary for the St. Louis Cardinals. Dodgers saw their opportunity, it pounced. The first time that I got annoyed with the LA Dodgers was the Snell thing, to be honest.
The Snell one was annoying, and then because that was another one where it's just like I think Snell was just jumping on an opportunity to go win a World Series,
Yeah,
and they just out offered everybody on a volatile player. It's
yeah,
like that's where they can take on the volatility and say, screw it, we don't care. Pitching's
right.
volatile anyways. Snell was annoying. I think that one annoyed me even more than Tanner Scott because of the impact that he can have.
Yeah.
And then yeah, the Tanner Scott situation. I
But
agree with you.
that's
Those are
it.
the
Like,
two. Those are the two where it's like, okay, like slow down,
yeah,
relax. Like you're just flexing your muscles at this
right.
point. You're flexing the Shohei Ohtani profits at this point, and that's what we
Exactly. Like last now, they gave up who I think is a breakout arm in 25 in Pepio, and they gave up maybe the everyday center fielder for Tampa and DeLuca. So that was a
and
trade
they
acquisition.
and that deal, like I think Glasnow's phenomenal, but like if he's throwing 110 plus
It
innings
could
a year,
be an
like
even deal.
and but also another situation, Rays are a smaller market, but why is he available? Because the Rays aren't going to pay him. So like
Yeah,
that was another situation where it's okay, we'll take him, and that's the larger issue here. Stop
right,
not paying guys and then cashing into the Dodgers.
right.
That's a big part of this thing as well. Again, of course, they're doing it in free agency, but they're doing it in other areas as well. But again, you're not able to just get a Glass now if you don't develop the way that they did. DeLuca, nobody even cared about.
No,
Middle round pick. He was a big piece in that deal. He's going to be their probably primary center fielder this year. You also have, again, Pepio, like who they developed and turned into a really good arm. And I agree. I think he could easily be a top 30 pitcher in baseball this coming season. I think in terms of availability, like if he's throws 160 innings, 170 innings, and Glass now stuck at 120, the F4s could be very similar there
hmm
between those two. So, I mean, that could end up going down as a pretty good trade for the Rays, but again, kind of unnecessary
yeah,
if you just pay and retain your stars. And that
sure,
ends up being the bigger problem here is
for
teams
sure.
not retaining their studs.
For sure. Now, Tanner Scott and fully transitioning to him now is the one where, it really does start to piss me off, to be honest, because it's like, okay, if you had even deals there, why pick the Dodgers? And I totally understand it from the player perspective. It's like he wants to go win a World Series. And with relievers, like it doesn't matter that Trinan's already on the roster, and it doesn't matter that Evan Phillips and Kopech is there. The best reliever is going to get the ninth inning, and then the second best reliever is going to get the eighth inning. Yada yada yada. Scott was paid to handle the ninth. It seems. I'd assume Scott is the closer. You can't have enough awesome relievers in a bullpen. So the fit makes sense. From Scott's perspective, it makes sense. But I'm looking at the Dodgers. I'm like, okay, you're increasing your tax bill for another elite reliever when you already have five. Okay, it just feels a little excessive to
Mm-hmm.
me.
Yeah, this was flexing the muscles to me. I
Yeah,
agree. And like, this is our video editor extraordinaire, Peyton Genus, was pointing it out too. Maybe the one guy that made Otani look uncomfortable in the box.
yeah,
Now you just bring him onto your team. I, what Tanner Scott's been able to do as a reliever at this point, like it's very clear that he is one of the more difficult ABs in Major League Baseball with the vert that he creates on the fastball, the slider off of that, the sheer velocity, the extension, all that good stuff. You just wonder, like, okay, the Cubs were in, they made a very serious offer. There's that quote that keeps recirculating that, from Andrew Friedman, which is, if you're realistic about free agents, you're always going to finish just short, essentially,
yeah,
paraphrasing there. But
yeah.
like, that's a spot where I think someone needs to just be unrealistic here, right? And say, okay, let's give him 80. Let's
hmm
give him 82. Tanner Scott's not a Dodger, I think, if somebody else is offering 80. And is it that outrageous to offer Tanner Scott that much money? I don't think that he is going to age poorly as a
No,
pitcher. He's been incredibly available. And is a guy that's been able to go, I think, used in so many different roles, and he gets righties out too. Lefties have no shot. Like the Cubs are in a spot here where they were finalists. Like push it forward a little bit. You haven't really done anything crazy financially. We talked about how if you really want to go all in on this year, which I think you have to now after paying the price trade wise that you did for Kyle Tucker, this would be a move that really alters their bullpen. Whereas for the Dodgers, it's like just continues to elevate an already great bullpen. If you wanted to have a chance to make that upgrade, pay a little bit more.
yeah,
And also, you're preventing the Dodgers from becoming the Dodgers. But I almost feel like there's a part of it now where it's like teams almost just like want it to inevitably happen, so they have more ammo to cry when we get to the CBA time in a year.
yeah. That's after the 2026 season is when I think the next collective bargaining agreement will be struck, and who knows how many games we'll miss at that point. Like if I were a betting man, it seems like we may miss a couple of games here because there are going to be a lot of gripes pushed forward by the owners, and there's going to be a lot of counter from the Players Association here. But yeah, it felt a little weird. And I'm looking at the rest of the closer crop that's available. Jose Leclerc got 1 year for 10 from Sacramento, and like, okay, I get it. Leclerc was not going to be in Tanner Scott's conversation. But the guys that were going to be in Scott's conversation are Jeff Hoffman, who got 3 for 33, and Carlos Estevez, who I would be pretty surprised if he got Hoffman money. I think he's going to get 2 for 25.
I agree.
There's a humongous drop off from Tanner Scott to the rest of the closer group. So if the Cubs are looking at this saying, like, you know what, let's let them pay 70 for Tanner Scott. I like my 25 of the Estevez. I don't think they made a great decision there, because I think that you just opted for a tier 3 closer over a tier 1 closer. And we know how valuable tier 1 closers are, which is why New York traded for Devin Williams, which is why Emmanuel Clase got Cy Young votes this year. Like, the
Yeah.
tier 1 closer, there are very few of those people. And there's a reason Josh Hader got $100 million. You could argue that Scott's 2 years leading up to free agency were much more impressive, not just impressive, much more impressive than Hader's final 2 years leading up to free agency. And you
Yeah.
get him, albeit a little bit older, at $30 million less.
Yeah.
It's a good deal for
Yeah.
Tanner Scott, but like, it might look like a good deal for the Dodgers in 6 months.
And that's a thing too. Like, and the Freddie Freeman deal looks like a great one as well. And
Yeah.
I think they were the highest bidders there, right? The last thing I just want to mention on this front, because the Cubs were the finalists, right? Like, and for Tanner Scott, and you wonder why they maybe didn't push forward a little bit. This is their owner, Tom Ricketts, on fans calling for the Cubs to spend more. They think somehow we have they think somehow we have all these dollars that the Dodgers have or the Mets have or the Yankees have, and we just keep it, which isn't true at all. What happens is we try to break even every year, and that's about it. There's no flipping shot that the Cubs are just trying to break even every year, especially with the limited spending over. Yeah, like they will spend in certain spots, but it's not like they're going crazy. If the Arizona Diamondbacks are spending more than you, given their market size and their RSN situation, I don't want to hear it. Like, you're telling me the Diamondbacks are taking some massive financial loss every single year, and you guys are just scraping the Cubs to get back to even. It's the
Yep.
fifth largest market in Major League Baseball, according to Major League Baseball, which shares a team. All those other markets share with another team. Shares with the most unwatchable team that nobody gives a shit about anyway. So if you're in Chicago and you want to go to a game, even if you're a White Sox fan, you're going to a Cubs game at
Yep.
this point. So like, you couldn't be in a better situation there. They're perpetually in the top 6 in attendance as well. And the Cubs also own all of the real estate around the area. So even if you were breaking even or just barely not breaking even, the appreciation of the land, the appreciation of the franchise can make it so easy to justify investing in the most historic team or one of the most historic teams that we have in baseball. If I could take over and own a ball club, the Cubs are one of the top of my list. So
Yeah.
the idea that you think fans are going to believe that you are fighting to break even every year as the owner of the Chicago Cubs, who is spending less than a lot of mid-market teams,
Yep.
I just don't want to hear it. And I think that on the heels of the Tanner Scott thing coming up just short, like, signing Tanner Scott is not going to decide whether you are able to profit or break even. And I think break even is very, 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 very funny too, because he didn't want to say slight profit. It
Yeah,
had to be
no.
break even.
No.
There's no shot that you're exactly breaking even. They are profiting. It's the Chicago Cubs. But at the same time, there's a reason why they're not showing us the financials either, right? If it was really a fight to break even every year, I think they'd have no freaking problem showing us that. Hey,
Yeah.
look, we're breaking even every single year. No, it's
Yeah.
not what's happening. So that's the frustrating part of it too, I think.
Cubs gate receipts. This is all per Statista. Cubs gate receipts in 2023 were $194 million. Their payroll was 216. So the gate pretty much covered 95% of their payroll. Their operating income in 23 was $68 million. Their gross income was $506 million. They were the third highest earning Major League Baseball team in 2023. If
Yeah.
number 3 is struggling to break even, this league may fold. And
Yeah.
I don't think they're struggling to break even here.
No, no.
So it's a little weird, man. But hey, Tanner Scott's an LA Dodger. All right, we're gonna get to the top 10 catchers in Major League Baseball in a moment. Before that, quick break. All right, the top catchers in Major League Baseball for the 2025 season. Again, here's how we did it. Me, Aram, Peter, Fink, Leo, Eric, all ranked catchers 1 to 15. Everybody that was outside the top 15 got a score of 20. You average out the score. Lowest average is the best catcher in baseball. Highest average is the worst catcher in baseball. There were a bunch of guys that got a bunch of 20s. I'm sorry. Keibert Ruiz, you did not make our honorable mentions. Your average score was 20. We do have four honorable mentions here. There were three of the tier two honorable mentions, and then there was a guy that was a clear cut 11th. The three honorable mentions that were tier two were Logan O'Hoppe of the Angels, Ivan Herrera, who's stepping into a full time role with the Cardinals, and Shea Langoliers of the Athletics. All three fun, young guys that I'm excited to see what they do in 2025. I don't think I would be shocked if any of those guys was a top 10 catcher going into 26.
Yeah, I would say I really like the honorable mentions here. I Ivan Herrera has been one of my long favorite prospects behind the dish. O'Hoppe's been banged up, and I think this is going to be a year where he takes a big leap forward. The only kind of odd man out there is just hanging on as he's just aged, but continue to be still a solid catcher is JT Realmuto, and
Yeah.
it's weird not seeing him in the top 10. I think it's more of a reality of where the position is headed in terms of young talent than an indictment on JT Realmuto falling off a cliff. He's definitely slowing down, but several years ago, if you had this version of JT Realmuto, he's still in the top 10, I think.
Yeah.
But because the position has become so talented with young players who are on the up and up, JT Realmuto got squeezed out a little bit.
Well, by literally 1 point when you look at total sum of votes. So again, lowest score wins. Gabriel Moreno, just to spoil it, and we'll do the whole rundown. Gabriel Moreno was our ninth best catcher in baseball. He had a sum score of 62. So the cumulative score that he got was 62. Francisco Alvarez was 10. His cumulative score was 63. And Real Muto was the first honorable mention. His cumulative score was 64. So we're talking about three guys that are all interchangeable from 9 to 11. So Real Muto, yes, he's an honorable mention. View him as the 11th best catcher in baseball. But I made the note in this article, man, and of course the article is linked in the episode description. Like his last two seasons have resulted in his two lowest F4 totals since his first full season of Major League Baseball. So he set the standard so high for himself, and we're seeing the aging process take place with him, and we're like, oh, it's just not JT anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and that part is a little hard to see, but it makes sense when you've got a catcher who's just so built on athleticism, right? Like his game is all about how athletic and how he moves around the dish, and it's a wear and tear position, and he's been very available for a very long time, and that's going to go down as one of the best trades in Phillies history, I
Yeah.
think, given that they gave up Sixto Sanchez
Yeah.
and Jorge Alfaro and shoot, who am I forgetting now? Lefty Will Stewart. Will Stewart, is that the name? Oh, regardless, he's still a solid catcher at this point. Above average offense, still fine defense. He's just not the guy that was in 2022 went 2020 while playing elite defense. Like just not quite that guy anymore. But if he's giving you 2-win seasons and yeah, still obviously giving you the intangibles and everything like that, if you probably asked the average pitcher, they probably would pick JT Realmuto in the top 10 of who they'd like to throw to.
Yeah.
But there's some other things that we're going to consider into the rankings. But I think he's going to still put together some solid seasons for next couple of years. And I do think it's clear though that the Phillies want to protect him a little bit more in terms
Yeah.
of the health and give him a little bit more longevity, which they've said.
Yeah. And again, these are rankings for 2025. It's not just here were the 10 best by WAR in 2024, because that would be a simple list. We're looking to this year who's going to perform well, and we feel like JT might just be outside the top 10. You nailed Will Stewart. The only thing you forgot was international bonus slot money.
Oh, they got
So
international bonus swap money too.
the Miami Marlins got slot money. So it
Oh, did they
was,
use that for Victor Mesa? Because that would just
ooh,
be the cherry on top.
I hope so. It was February 7th, 19. So I wonder when Victor
I think
signed.
Victor was right before that, unfortunately.
Okay. But I don't know. Maybe it was like a little backtrack type deal and they covered some of that. But it was JT to the Phillies for Will Stewart, Alfaro, Sixto Sanchez, and IFA money, which is interesting. You want odds or evens?
Um, I'll take odds.
Okay. I will start us then with the evens, and the 10th best catcher in baseball for 2025 is Francisco Alvarez of the New York Mets. This is a loaded conversation when it comes to Alvarez, and I think the bulk of the conversation already happened with Eric Chavez, who is the Mets hitting coach. Francisco Alvarez needs to learn how to hit again. He wants Alvarez to learn how to be a good hitter. There was a power dip. This guy hit 25 home runs as a 22-year-old, or his age, what, 21 season in
Yeah.
2023. And then his age 22 season, the batting average went up a little bit, but he only hit 11 homers. Of course, he missed some time with back spasms at the end of the year, but he tore a ligament in his thumb in the middle of the year, so he was limited to 100 games. He was a 102 WRC plus guy. 24 was not the best version of Francisco Alvarez that we have seen offensively, and it won't be the best version that we
No.
see offensively. I think he's going to be better in 25. The thing that surprised me, and I feel like this is a health thing, he graded out as one of the best defensive catchers in Major League Baseball in 2023. He was good, not great in
Yeah.
24. I think with a healthy thumb and a healthy back, he gets back to that borderline elite defensive catcher and a threat for 25 homers in 25.
Totally agree. I mean, back and thumb, I don't think you could pick more. I don't think you could pick a worse pair of injuries to have for a catcher defensively, right? Like,
Right.
get down in the squat and catch 100 plus, baby.
Get beat
Like,
up, man. Have fun with
so
Edwin Diaz.
yeah, yeah, like just running in on your thumb. The blocking took a big hit, and the framing took a slight hit. So like, I think that absolutely is a big part of it. I also think dealing with just the mental hurdles, and I had my whole rant about it. When that story came out from Chavez, like, you have a 21-year-old catcher who hit 25 bombs. As he gets more acclimated to the major leagues, the batting average and the OBP will go up. You don't need to get him to shift his focus to then becoming a different hitter. His identity has always been hit bombs. And then you find out how to hit those bombs without it coming at the expense of contact at the highest level. There's always going to be that transition process a little bit. And we saw that in 23. I thought it was a perfect situation for him to then be able to say, okay, I'll hit 25 home runs again. And maybe if I hit 220, 230 this year and I walk a little bit more, I'm comfortably a 110 WRC plus instead of the 97 that he was. Yes, it was an incremental increase in WRC plus because he got on base at a higher clip, but it was the same WOBA and the X WOBA was lower. And so you could argue that he just did not hit the ball nearly as well as he hit it the year before because you've got your hitting coach in your ear saying, what you've done your entire life that has made you a consensus top catching prospect in the game
Yep.
and hit 25 home runs as a 21-year-old while playing elite defense. That's not going to work. You need to try something totally different. And he was totally caught in between of like trying to make contact and trying to lean into the power that has made him such a special prospect and young player. I think he's going to get back to who he is and who he has been
Yep.
next year. I don't care if you hit two. Look at Cal Raleigh, dude.
Right.
Go play great defense. What I would have been hammering home for him is be more selective.
Hmm.
Walk. Don't be afraid to go down looking. If you go down looking twice in a game, I don't care. As long as you're making good swing decisions and you're not passive. If you're getting your A swing off in the right spots, the cream's going to rise to the top. You might strike out 28% of the time, but if you're walking 12 and you're hitting 25 to 30 homers and you're playing great defense, you're going to be in a great spot. And then you just hope as he matures and understands how major league pitching looks that he'll get more comfortable consistently making contact and get that average up and up. But trying to get him to reinvent himself and be
Yep.
someone different because that was like a very old guard feeling type of thing that like, I'm sorry, but like Eric Chavez could never hit the ball as hard as Francisco Alvarez can.
Right.
And so I just don't. I think there was a little bit of a disconnect there.
Yeah.
Um, that was the frustrating thing for me. I just don't like players getting like pulled away from who they are, and you can really dome up a young player doing that. And I think he was domed up. He said it himself. So I'm very excited to see what it looks like this year and 25. And I really hope that they let him get back to him. But the defense, without a doubt, is going to be better, and that's why
Yeah.
he's number 10.
I will say, like, off the stat sheet, he's one of my favorite players in baseball because he has a smile and he has this attitude about him that is infectious. And if I were a Mets fan, I think he'd contest with Lindor for being my favorite player. Like
Really?
he,
I like
oh
that.
my God. I mean, dude, every time I see an interview with Francisco Alvarez and like him talking about the OMG stuff and the Mets clubhouse experience, like he's just a guy that I feel like a lot of people could gravitate towards. Even at
Hmm.
22, 23 years old, he seems like he has this youthful energy, but he's mature enough to handle catching there. I think he's the perfect catcher in New York City. Like I
Yeah,
think he
I like that.
is exactly what a catcher should look like in New York, whether it be the Yankees or the Mets. A guy that is bringing a smile, a guy that is galvanizing a clubhouse. I really enjoy the vibe that Francisco Alvarez brings.
And what I will say, last thing on him is just it's cool now that we've been doing this long enough on the just baseball side where we can talk about like where we were at with them as a prospect, and then now that a couple years into the big leagues, like what's the same, what's different. I 100% underestimated the defensive potential here. Like I definitely thought he would be an above average defender,
Yep.
but this is a guy that looks like he could be a plus defender. And I don't know if I saw that, as a prospect. So it's also a testament to the work ethic and everything. Like there was questions about whether he'd be able to handle things defensively behind the dish for this team that was kind of in win now mode. And he had no problem doing that 2 years ago. And I think now being healthy, he's going to get back to that. And it takes a lot of pressure off the bat.
Okay, so plus defender and Alvarez. Number 9 is plus plus.
Oh, yeah. And I think health is going to be the big thing here as well. Number 9 catcher for 2025 is Gabriel Moreno of the Arizona Diamondbacks, who was banged up last year, right? Only played 97 games, but when he was on the field, very solid 266, 353, 380 slash line, 5 homers, 45 driven in. Not going to punch out, right? 15% strikeout rate, 107 WRC plus, 2.5 F4, and he threw out 24% of base stealers, which was down because I think he was also a guy that was banked up. This is a guy that, when healthy, I think you can make a very clear case of him being the best run stopper in Major League Baseball. And he had a stretch when the Diamondbacks had the second half that they had in 2023, and then into made the run into the World Series. I think he was throwing out almost half of the attempted base stealers in the second half there in 23.
What the entire total in 2023 was 39%.
Do you
He
like
caught
understand how insane that is with the new
39%.
rules? With the new rules to throw out 40% of attempted base stealers is you have relievers that you have to catch that basically are handing out stolen bases, right? So the fact that I know the D-backs actually do a good job of identifying guys that are quicker to home and really emphasizing that. But this is a guy that just doesn't commit errors either. We'll go old school here. 997 fielding percentage in 2023, 990, and I never cite that. But once you get to like that close to 1,000, I'm gonna cite it,
You
and that's
cited it with
exactly
another
what he
guy
had.
too. You cited it with a prospect, and I was like, "What are we doing here?" But it does make sense when it's 997. It is pertinent information. It's like 20 wins. It's like it is pertinent when it gets that crazy.
5 errors in over 200 games
Yeah,
as a catcher is crazy. I think offensively, like we saw what he did in the playoffs in 23. And I think we've seen it through stretches. The injuries, I think, have really made it hard for him to string together consistent offense. We talk about prospects.
yep.
Moreno is one of my favorite prospects, like ever. If you could probably put him on the Mount Rushmore of like players that I identified that I was just unrelentingly bought in on. And like that's why when the trade went down, I'm like, oh, the D-backs are cooking. Like I probably have a little bit of a bias towards Gabriel Moreno, which is why I skewed on the higher side, but I wasn't the highest ranking wise. Leo Morgenstern had him 8. You were tied with Finkelstein on the lowest at
Yeah,
13. I had him at 9. Peter had him at 9. Eric Truden at 10.
yeah,
13, I think, is rude, but I get it because he was banged up.
yeah.
He is yet to play more than 111 games in a season here, but of course, 2023 was after the trade, and then 2024 banged up. But this is a guy that I do think full season, the defense is going to continue to shine through.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit more power in there. He does hit the ball hard, and that's what we've always talked about. I always thought a misconception with his profile is, yeah, he hits line drives, but this guy, like, he was hitting balls that got stuck in the wall in Buffalo, like 111 off the bat. He hits the ball hard. He can hit for average, and I think he can be a guy that's 280, a few more home runs plus defense, and that pushes him towards top 5 or 6 catcher in the game if he has a year that he can have next year. I think both him and Alvarez are guys, and I'm looking to make a leap next year and make this a cluster for our 2026 rankings.
It was pretty rude of me, but I think it's probably because of my antiquated thought process when it comes to catchers. And, like the lack of games played certainly hindered Moreno in my mind. But the other thing that jumped out is like, it's not like he hit 15 homers and then hit 5 homers. I just worry, is this going to be a guy that hits fewer than 10 homers in a given season? I think he hits 10 or more, but that's also a bet.
He
It's
needs
a
the doubles.
prediction.
He needs
Yeah,
the doubles for sure.
yeah, he
And
needs the doubles. So it's like I'm looking at a guy who is not really getting extra base hits at all. 97 games, he had a 380 slug.
yeah,
Like
no, it's
it's
not
it's
good.
hard for me to look at a catcher and say, okay, I'm okay with you, and I know 24% caught stealing was down because of injury, but if you're not going to throw out 30% of base stealers and be an elite run stopper, I need you to slug over 400, and he didn't. So I'm
No.
waiting on that to come back. I would guess that it does, but I wasn't ready to be as optimistic with Moreno as I am with Alvarez.
Yeah, and that's where just like I think I'm going to be optimistic about this guy until he retires,
Yeah.
given that like literally since Loe, since Griffin Conan was in the Blue Jays organization and said, dude, there's
There's
this
this
like
kid Moreno.
$60,000 IFA guy that I've never seen make hitting look easier.
Yeah.
And he's single A.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, let me dig in here. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And at that point, I don't even think it was ranked. And then the ascension happened from there. But like he wouldn't have even been on my radar if Griff was just not like, this guy gets 3 hits every day. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
Like tap in. And then the rest was history. Every level, he was outrageous. But what he's done to this point, I can totally understand not having him in the top 10. I think that he's going to do it this coming year. And if he does, like everyone wants to hand it to the Dodgers, I get it. But if Moreno makes the leap, Burns is Burns, and Jameson's back, and you start to look at this team here. Like
Feels
I'm
good
not
for the
saying they're
whole
winning
year.
110 games, but they're a threat, and they're going to be on the Dodgers' heels. No different than the way that the Padres were. Came up a little short, but no different than the way the Padres were last year.
I think they can absolutely bunny hop the Padres here, especially with what the Padres have unfortunately missed out on this offseason and then what they are reluctant to do with constraints and that whole ownership deal right now. It's a shitty situation, but I mean Arizona has struck while the iron's been hot. And I give them a ton of credit for that. And if Moreno does bounce back healthy and Carroll doesn't have that terrible pre-All-Star break, we could be looking at an 100-win wild card team, no
Yeah.
doubt.
And I just want to shout out real quick Ken Kendrick for not crying poor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Paid
In the
Burns.
same division where he could be the most discouraged and say, "What do you want me to do?"
Isn't he a
Anyways,
card collector?
is he?
I think he is. I think he's a card collector.
Maybe that's why he's not crying poor. He was in on the Corbin Carroll cards when he like messed up his shoulder the first
Right.
time.
Right. It's like, let me sell off all my Demetrio Crisantis so I can afford Corbin Burns. Why not? Okay, let's go to number 8 here and the duality of the catching position because we just talked about two youngins. And now we go to Salvi. Salvador Perez is the 8th best catcher in baseball entering 2025. I had Salvi 7. You had him 8. Peter had him 7. Eric had him 7. The only guy that had him outside the top 10 was Leo, who had him at 12. And that felt a little disrespectful, Leo. I'll be
I
honest here
love
because
Leo though. Leo sticks to his guns, man. If he's got his opinion, he's got it, baby.
Yep. But Salvi hit 270 this past year, 27 homers, drove in 104. He K'd less than 20% of the time. Is he going to walk? Absolutely not. But who cares?
No,
That's not sexy. A 115 WRC plus. And I mean, this guy, like, it's funny. We viewed that guy after he came back from elbow surgery in 2019 as holy hell, his catching days may be behind him. He might have to DH. And then all of a sudden, he's gotten better and better and better. Like it was a 2024 renaissance defensively for Salvi. If
which
it
is
was a
crazy.
nightmare, and if he was a DH that was in the crouch still, I probably would have been with Leo outside the top 10. But it somehow got better defensively in 24.
And offensively, man, like drove in 104. Like
Yeah,
he's
dude.
still mashing. And that's a team that, yeah, Bobby Witt being one of the best players in Major League Baseball, that helps, no doubt about it. But you can make the case that after Salvi, like there's not a lot of protection there. You have a hyper aggressive hitter who you can kind of pitch around, and he still was extremely productive. If Salvi was more selective, I would have a lot more confidence in him aging gracefully. So it's
Yeah.
just like every year, it was like Larry Fitzgerald. It's a weird comp because Larry Fitzgerald was so mechanically sound and everything. But like in fantasy football, every year I was afraid to draft Larry Fitzgerald because I thought that would be the year that he finally slows down because
Let's
it's like
hope.
he's not fast, he's old, he can't keep putting up these numbers. And then somebody would grab Larry Fitzgerald and he'd be really solid all
Yeah.
year long fantasy wise. I feel like that's where Salvador Perez is at, where like every year you look at a lot of the data, you just look at the age, and you're like, this might be the year where I don't want to overrank him or whatever. And again, I know it wasn't good in 23. I think it was more the reason why we thought no shot in 24. But here he is again, playing good defense now all of a sudden, mashing, and I can't fully say that he's not going to be good. Like I just, there's no way it would just be presumptive and I think pessimistic. Um, Also saw him the other day down here in South Florida. He's whipping a camo Cybertruck. So like I think he's feeling himself. Obviously,
Hmm.
that's a car that you got to be feeling yourself if you're whipping that.
You
And
have to
that
exude.
makes me feel like he's gonna have a. Again, I'm not a Cybertruck fan. Put that on record. I think
Yeah.
they're kind of brutal. But you know what? Like if you are Salvador Perez, you're already him. So it doesn't. Your car doesn't make you more or less him. And you're whipping the camo Cybertruck. It reminds me of Cespedes pulling up in like the slingshot car thing.
Yeah.
Like you
Yep.
know what? Like you're already sick. Like tip of the cap. That's cool. I think Salvador Perez is tapping into the youth in 2025. I think he's gonna hit another 30.
If he's rolling up to Kaufman in a camo Cybertruck, I feel pretty decent about it. And that is a car that it's like you have to exude so much confidence or you have to just suck as a guy. And I feel
Yes,
like
I
he's
don't
the
think there's any in
first.
between. And
Yeah. And
Salvi's the man.
Salvi's
So
the man. So we know that he doesn't just suck. We know that he's a good dude and he's probably as confident as anybody going into 2025. But yeah, that is a tough look. I was thinking about what Elon product I would ever buy, and I think the answer is Starlink. If I ever like got into the whole nautical thing, like good Wi-Fi in the middle of the Atlantic sounds interesting to me.
yeah, no, that's without a doubt.
So,
I would need that.
but that's about it. Let's get to seven.
Yainer Diaz checks in at number 7, Houston Astros catcher, who is kind of the starter kit in some ways for Salvador Perez, where you got hyper aggressive, but man, can the kid just hit? And the defense has come along. You know, is he glove first? No, but I think he turned in a really nice season overall last year. 148 games, 299, 325, 441 slash line, 16 homers, 84 driven in, just a 17% strikeout rate, 117 WRC plus, and a 3.1 F war. I think the big thing with Yainer Diaz here, man, is like this is a guy that was a hitter. Like
Yeah.
at every stop in the minor leagues, it was the bat that made him a top 100 prospect for us. And another guy that was underrated, you know, definitely developmental story there. Is he going to be a superb defender? No, but there was a question of like, is it even worth throwing him behind the dish, or do we just kind of trust the bat and put him at first, or see if he can play somewhere else? And I think now it's gotten to the point where he's good enough back there, and you hope he can continue to develop back there to where if he's an average defender, bat to ball wise, he's fantastic. He hits the ball hard. It's a little bit of the same conversation as Moreno in terms of like hitting the ball hard. Can that translate into enough elevation to slug more?
Yeah.
Obviously, he has slugged more than Moreno comfortably, but this is a guy that hits the ball hard enough to be hitting 25, 30 home runs with the Crawford boxes. And instead, he's been more at that like 16, 15, 16 range because of the fact that a lot of the contact's on the ground and it's that flatter swing and it's very aggressive. 41% chase rate last year. But the fact that he circumvents that 41% chase rate to still just strike out at 17% of the time and to hit almost 300, I think just tells you how good of a feel for the barrel this guy has. And as long as he's not a liability defensively, he's going to give you 3-win seasons as a catcher.
I was one of the three high guys on Yainer Diaz because I absolutely love him. And there was something about being freed from the Martin Maldonado experience while I watched Maldonado catch for the White Sox that made me like him even more. It's like, wow, you waited patiently for that guy to clear out and you run circles around him in year one. It was really nice to get that infusion of Joe Espada in Houston and Yainer Diaz taking over catching duties full time. Trivia before I get any farther. Yainer Diaz had the fifth lowest walk rate among qualified hitters in Major League Baseball. Who were the four with a lower walk rate?
Salvador Perez.
No,
No.
no.
Lower walk rate. I'm trying to think of people who just legitimately swing all the freaking time. Um, Luis Robert in that conversation, or no? He walked enough.
Luis Robert was not in that conversation. He did not qualify. Salvador Perez was 28th. He and Jackson Chorio had identical
Wow,
walk
real
rates.
patient this past year. We should
Yeah.
push him up higher.
Yeah. Yainer Diaz, 3.9% walk rate.
Yeah, it's not great.
That was the fifth lowest in Major League Baseball among qualified hitters. Fourth was his teammate, Jeremy Pena.
Oh yeah.
Third was Luis Ariz, who sported a 3.6% walk rate and a 4.3% K rate, which is hilarious. Two was Ezekiel Tovar,
Oh, that
3.3%.
he's never seen a pitch he doesn't like.
And number one at a 2.6% walk rate, Cedar Rafaela, the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah. Kind of boy, keep swinging.
Keep
Like that
swinging.
stuff's crazy to me. I guess it's hard to like if you've always been a swing mode guy, but man, like you give yourself a shot. And that's the thing with Diaz. Like if he ups his walk rate to 7%, like it really bolsters the offensive profile so much
Yes.
because he's hitting almost 300.
Yeah.
Like the OBP, like that you need a little bit more there.
And the
And
slug's
and all of a
good.
sudden, this
Yeah.
guy's putting up good OPS numbers.
Yeah, dude. It's fascinating to me, but I think he's really athletic. Like I could see him
For sure.
progressing defensively in a way that Will Smith progressed, where it's like, okay, you're clearly an athlete, just get more comfortable catching at the major league level. I feel like the defensive value is going to increase steadily year by year. But again, if he walks just a little bit more, I mean, a 3.9% walk rate still resulted in a 117 WRC plus. Like we can
Yep.
push that thing to 125, 130. We're talking about you being a consistent top five catcher in baseball.
What I like is there's two paths to more production offensively. It's that or elevate more
Totally. Yeah,
consistently. And I think they can go hand in hand, but you can also have one or the other go through. And if you have both, then we're talking about a guy who could be one of the better, hitters, hitting catchers in baseball.
exactly. Let's get to number six here. And number six is a Yankee. It's Austin Wells, and he is your sixth best catcher in baseball. Me and Eric were the low men at eight. You and Peter and Leo were the high men at six. Austin Wells was a much better framer and overall catcher than I was ever expecting him to be. This was a guy that did not scream plus plus catcher in the minor leagues at any point, but he was a very good defensive catcher. And I was thinking about the Yankee situation. When was the last time they had a catcher that they could Sharpie in as an everyday guy? They tried doing it with Trevino when he won a platinum glove. Like he was not the guy. It was
No.
Gary Sanchez at the peak, but that was pre-COVID, man. Like the last couple of years of Gary were tough. You're
Mhm.
looking at a sharpied in piece of the Yankee lineup. And with a Yankee lineup without Soto, you need guys like Austin Wells. And he was good last year offensively. It was a 105 WRC plus. It's gonna get better. He's gonna hit
Yep.
more than 13 home runs if he plays 115 games again.
And I mean, the fact that he has become the defender that he has become, I think, is a testament to the Yankees' development side of things. And that he entered the top 100 for us ahead of the season because of the progress that he made. I think what we saw, and you'll see this with young catchers, it's Patrick Bailey conversation as well. He faded at the end of the year. Second half, the guy got tired. Like you could just see it physically, and then ended up going to the playoffs. And I'm sure he was really feeling it down that stretch. But the fact that he was also able to throw out 26% of base runners as well, that was a part of his game that was not good before. So to continue to get better there. But I think offensively, we really saw those numbers taper off where he was looking like he could have been the rookie of the year, and unfortunately comes up short because the second half numbers were so poor. I think it's always a question, especially with the young catchers, of was it the league adjusting to him and now he may have some challenges going into the next season, or was it just him quite literally fatiguing as a catcher who played 115 games, 110 of them were behind the dish, and I don't think he had really ever done that in the minor leagues. I want to side with the latter, that
Yep.
this was just a guy that ran out of gas a little bit towards the end of the season, because I don't even think that the Yankees were planning to catch him as consistently as they ended up rolling with him, because he became such a good option for them. And at the end of the year, like you just saw it, and it wasn't even like a first half, second half thing. It was more like the last month and a half, 2 months,
Probably just
where it
dog
was just
tired.
so bad that it weighed down everything.
Yep.
But that makes me feel even more confident, to be honest, that it was like you look at July by month, WRC plus was 163 in July, 165 in August, and then September was 22. In September he hit 111, 217, 194. Like he literally would have needed to have the worst month possible to bring his numbers down to, close to league average offensively, and that's exactly what happened. So like I think you can look at him still having the big July and big August and say, hey, this is a guy he's gonna be a really good hitter again next year, or at least a very solid one for the position. And I think just the focus will be, can you survive 162 or 140 as a catcher? And
Yeah.
again, we saw the same thing happen with Pat Bailey, who admitted he just ran out of gas.
Yeah. I like to think that he will survive 162, but he got tired at 115 when Jose Trevino was spelling him. Like Austin Wells was not hurt. He was limited to 115 because Trevino was still on the roster. I'm just looking at the Yankee backup catcher situation. Ben Rice is not getting in the crouch for the Yankees at the big league level in 25. Rafael Flores might. Is Alex Jackson spelling Austin Wells? Like they may need him to catch 125, 130 games. And
Yeah.
I worry about September again because each time you up that workload, you enter uncharted territory. And he will enter uncharted territory in 2025 because it's his job.
Yep, 100%, and they're going to need him to. But defensively, probably one of the best framers in the sport this past year.
Yeah, plus 12. I think he was only behind Bailey.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty damn good company.
It is damn good company. And we are going to get to number 5 in a moment, but we will take one more quick break. Who is that company when it comes to best framers in baseball?
Yeah, like you said, it's number 5, Pat Bailey of the San Francisco Giants. Who this was like a big conversation of value. Like how much do you value the glove versus the offensive side of things? And obviously, as a catcher, it's all about the glove. That's a very important side. But I don't think there's an example of a catcher that is more proficient defensively and more deficient offensively than Patrick Bailey, but he's so damn good defensively that you have a situation here where he has to be a top 5 catcher. And consensus across the board for us was either 5 with Leo ranking him 4. 2024 numbers, 121 games, 234, 298, 339 slash line. Not great, but also remember where he's calling home. Even with that, though, you get WRC plus to adjust for park factors, 81 WRC plus. Not good, right? 4.3 F war because this guy is such an animal behind the dish. And he is a privilege to watch, whether it's the way he's stealing strikes or the way that he can now limit the running game. Really, the only thing, and he talked about it on the show last year when he came on, was blocking. And if his blocking comes along a little bit more, he may grade out defensively as like the best catcher in the StatCast era. But when we're looking at what this guy can do, he's altering ball games with the amount of strikes that he can steal, and that's incredibly valuable. This is something that over the last few years we see the one knee thing, right? And catchers really leaning into that because teams value stolen strikes more than 90 feet. Like if you're a little bit higher of a probability of giving up a stolen base, but you're stealing strikes there, teams will take that every day of the week. With Patrick Bailey, you're getting both, right? He's throwing out 30% of base stealers, and he's also going to frame better than anybody. So, I mean, if the offense was, and league average he's a long ways from it, right? He's 20% away from it.
Yeah.
But if he could get to league average, I mean, this is a guy that I think would then comfortably be in the conversation for top 3 catcher in the game. And he'd put up F4 numbers that we've probably never seen from a league average offensive like slash line.
Yeah. If he's a 100 WRC plus, 5.5, 6
At
wins.
least I think so. Yeah.
I mean, dude, holy crap. I'm thinking about catchers in recent memory that have changed a game like Pat Bailey has. And I'm going to names that, Bailey is nowhere close to matching at this point in his career, but like the ones that I remember watching that actually changed games defensively, a younger Salvador Perez in Kansas City during the peak of their powers. Buster Posey at the peak of his powers in San Francisco. Yachty obviously is the first name that jumps to my mind. He kind of has that defensive impact, man, when you just turn on a game and watch what he does, stealing strikes, cutting down base runners. Like he controls everything in a game defensively. And like it is a question like how much do you value defense? How much do you value the best defender in baseball? By fielding run value, he was at plus 22 this year. That was 5 better than Dalton Varsho, who was second. And it's funny because we look at Bailey as a consensus top 5 catcher. 2 through 5 in terms of fielding run value in Major League Baseball. Varsho, who I think is good, but he's not sniffing the top 10 corner outfielders in baseball.
I think he's underrated though, which we mentioned a few
Varsho,
episodes
yeah, he
ago.
totally
Yeah.
is because he provides a little bit offensively. PCA was third. Like, we think PCA is due for a big breakout. But then after that, it's Jacob Young, Jose Siri. Like, Jose Siri was thrown away for a minor league reliever to the New York
Yeah.
Mets. So we're talking about a center fielder that is an elite defender, one of the best defenders in baseball, that is worth pennies. And we're talking about a catcher that is one of the best defenders in baseball, that is a top 5 catcher in Major League Baseball. That shows you that the catching position is so much more important than literally anywhere else on a diamond.
When you can make an impact on every pitch versus a center fielder is, and that's one of the most valuable positions, defensively as well.
Yeah.
But you can only make an impact if there's a ball hit in the vicinity of center field, which, how many of those happen a game? I don't know what the exact number would be, but a lot less than the total number of pitches thrown on the fringes of the strike zone, right? And or compounding with runners on the move and all of those things. I mean, Patrick Bailey has the ability to give his team an advantage every single pitch. Every single pitch that's on the edge, he can frame that and increase the chances of it being a strike. The first half, second half numbers in his career, by the way, are crazy because it's back-to-back years now here where he had a good first half, really bad second half. In his career, in the first half, a 121 WRC plus. In his career in the second half, 35.
How big is the sample? Do you have plate appearances or games or something?
I can have that in 2 seconds here. And it's 370 at bats,
Like, that's
357 at bats,
that's a
107 games, 107 games.
that's a lot of ABs to be really bad.
Yeah. So he just seems to be fading. The other side of it is he's a switch hitter who is far, far better from the left side, which you'd prefer.
Yeah.
Definitely prefer him being better from the left side. But he's also one of those like bordering on the is it worth it guys, where I almost wonder if he should go left on left. As a right-handed hitter last year, 180, 237, 213 slash line. That's a 451 OPS.
Yeah.
I just wonder, like, if he's a 550 OPS left on left, you're probably better off that way. Here's the weird part about it. You don't bang it because it was totally different in 2023. In 2023, he's 279, 353, 434 from the right side. And from the left side, he was 230, 284, 350, 633 OPS. So all that to say, he's going to keep switch hitting. But if
Yeah.
he can get the right side to get anywhere near where it was the year before, then he's got a shot at league average offense. I don't know what happened from the right side last year.
I'm excited to see what happens in 25 with him because something's going to change offensively, whether it's running through the tape or getting a little bit better against left-handed pitching. Like, something's going to change, or we're just looking at this again and he slots in at 5 again next year because he's
Too
yet
good
again
defensively.
the
Yeah.
best defensive player in baseball. So we'll see what happens. Let's go to number 4, though. And I love that Leo stood his ground here because he had Bailey 4. He had Will Smith 5, but the rest of us had a Will Smith 4. And Will Smith of the LA Dodgers is the 4th best catcher in Major League Baseball. Is he a good framer? No. Negative 10 framing runs. That's kind of crazy. But he did catch 33% of would be base stealers. Now, there were a lot of guys that swipe bags on him. Will Smith is one of the more consistent offensive catchers in Major League Baseball. And I think that the argument could have been made for the last 3 years that he was the most consistent. With William Contreras doing what he did again in 2024, the answer pivots to him. I also think Raleigh might have jumped Will Smith, but we're looking at Will Smith as a guy that is a guaranteed above average hitter for them in
Yeah.
the 5 spot, in the 6 spot. 111 WRC plus this past year, that was a career low.
Yeah.
I wrote this down. While he's coming off a career low 111, let's also note that he hasn't had a single season offensively where he's produced a WRC plus lower than 110. Like, that's the other way of looking at it.
Career 124 as a catcher.
Dude, like, and he's gotten better year by year behind the plate. Now, 24 was a little bit of a regression, but we saw that steady incline when it came to catching acumen and defensive ability with Will Smith. And I do think that this guy is a league average catcher defensively that is a near lock for a mid 200s batting average, 20 homers, and well above average on base skills and slug.
Yeah. And I think that's why you can pretty much Sharpie him into the top 5 every year. Because there's no way offensively he's going to be worse next year. I just think that's the thing with seasons sometimes, especially as a catcher, because instead of playing 150, you're going to skew closer to like 120, 125.
Right.
If you have a decent sized slump, it's just going to be, it could be just a down year for you
Yeah.
offensively.
Yeah.
And I think a decent sized slump is the difference between a 118 WRC plus and a 111. I think some people might look at the numbers and say, well, he's steadily declined since 2021, right? Where it's a 130, then it's a 127 and 22, then it's a 118 and 23, and it's a 111 and 24. I don't know if I buy that as a steady decline from age 26 to 29. I think he could very easily just bounce back and be right back, right around his career averages
Yeah.
next year. Though, if he does take another half step backwards, then I think that's definitely something we have to look at heading into, you know, 2026. I just don't see it happening because, as you said, he's just been too good offensively. He's too consistent. The field of hits always been there. The approach has always been there, and he just hits the ball hard. He's going to be a good hitter. And the fact that now defensively he's gotten himself to a point where he's solid, especially
Yeah.
limiting the run game, which the volume is there, right? But I think teams have realized you can't just run on him all day anymore.
No.
And he's fundamentally sound. It's tough to knock him as a catcher. He's a very safe bet every year.
Yeah, I found it very hard to knock him because of the consistency year over year, and you know exactly what you're getting offensively and defensively. Like we have seen consistency, albeit it's not elite like some of these other guys. And I'm looking at the top three here, but you also don't have these weird finicky spurts like Salvi, who was elite, then terrible, then decent.
Yeah,
So
100%. And that kind of leads us into the next guy who shorter sample size here, but has been a little sporadic for his standards. Number 3, the third best catcher in Major League Baseball is Adley Rutschman of the Baltimore Orioles, who was a clean sweep at 3 across the board here, by the way, for everybody. And it makes sense. He does it on both sides, where in 2024, a little bit of a disappointing season for him, but it says a lot about you if this slash line and these numbers are disappointing for you. 148 games, 250, 318, 391 slash line, 19 home runs, 79 driven in, only punched out 16% of the time, a 104 WRC plus, and a 2.8 F4. I think what compounded the feeling of disappointment with Rutschman this past season is that, well, one, he was just considered the best catching prospect in baseball as long as he was a prospect.
right.
But two, I think it felt as though this would be the year that he takes that like big step in the right direction to ascend towards superstardom. And I think he already kind of did that, right? Back-to-back 5-win seasons. He clearly already was a star. But I thought this was a point where it was like, he might stamp himself as like, look out, William Contreras. This is the best catcher in baseball. And there's no conversation about it.
Yeah.
And he didn't do that. He's still top 3, not because of the season that he had last year. That last year was not a top 3 season.
No.
But when your rookie season is a top 3 season, and then the season after that was arguably the best season, or right there with the best season, you really have to factor that in. He was also banged up last year. The catching position was pretty ravaged, as to be expected. It's it's a physical experience back there. But I think just seeing the walk rate drop by 4% was very surprising. I think seeing just the offense in terms of the bat to ball not as consistent, seeing him not defend quite as well as we're used to seeing, makes me feel like he was just truly was playing through some discomfort. Yeah. And I think a guy that was consistently, slam dunk top selection, slam dunk top prospect pretty much at every stop, whether it was number 1 prospect, number 1 at his position. And then the first 2 years, 5 wins back-to-back seasons while raking as a switch hitter. I think you can give him the benefit of the doubt that in his age 26 season, that was a disappointment in his 3rd full year, essentially, that maybe something was just at hand physically.
And if his disappointing year is a 2.8 win season, I feel really good about him being my catcher. And I think Baltimore is already priced out of Gunnar Henderson. I think it's time to pay Adley Rutschman. And I don't know if you're getting a discount on him after 2024, but I do think that you can feel very comfortable knowing that his quote unquote bad season is 148 games at a 2.8 WAR.
Yeah, no doubt. And this is another guy that I think if you look at the way that the season progressed, another catcher that was banged up, and it was the second half that really crushed him. in terms of the overall statistics. Dealt with like a tricep issue. I think there was some other things probably going on as well. Final 60 games, slashes 204, 377, 296. I think that includes a couple postseason games in there, but like he was still making consistent contact too. That's the craziest thing. The EVs were down
Yeah.
and he was cheating a little bit more. To me, that's a guy like all of a sudden he's chasing more. That's a guy that I think felt a little slow probably.
Yeah.
And when you feel a little slow, it's going to really dismantle what makes you such a good hitter. And you saw it from the left side specifically, where he was really struggling, more than ever. So I just wonder how much the injury was factoring in. I think he needed a couple weeks. At times, like people were saying, maybe he should hit the IL. I don't think he ever fully did more than 2 to 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. It's really hard to remember
Right.
everybody's timeline there, but definitely a guy that I think was dealing with some discomfort. And I mean, when you look at what he can do as a defender as well,
Yeah.
he has always been so sound back there. Such a good athlete for how big he is. He's going to hit 20 home runs. He's going to make a lot of contact. And I think he's going to walk more again this coming season. I would bet on him having a top three catcher season. The only reason that he doesn't is one of the guys that we already talked about making a leap, which could very much happen. But I think in terms of Adley being Adley, I expect him to get back to 5 wins next year.
No doubt. And there is a consistency to Adley Rutschman, which we love, but there is also a consistency to number two on this list. Cal Raleigh of the Seattle Mariners is the second best catcher in baseball, and Cal Raleigh is not like a box of chocolates. You know exactly what you're going to get every year from Cal Raleigh, and 2024 was the best version of Raleigh. He played 153 games. He hit 220. You know you're going to get a low 200s batting average, but you know you're going to get a slug in the mid 400s. You know he's a threat for 30 homers. You know he's a threat for 100 RBIs. He gave you 34 bombs and 100 driven in. You know he's going to walk at 10% or slightly better. You know he's going to be an elite defender, and he won the Platinum Glove in the American League. The voting committee viewed him as the best defender in the American League. Is that right? Is that wrong? I'm not in a position to tell you, but I will tell you that he was plus 13 in framing runs. He was plus 14 in overall defensive run value, and he caught 26% of would be base stealers. He is exactly what I want in a catcher. I want a guy that can hit bombs, especially in Seattle. Like, you need bombs, and
I
he
was
is
going to
giving
say,
them bombs. I want a guy that can hit bombs. I want a guy that is going to be a net positive offensively, and I want an elite defender. He gives me literally everything I want.
I mean, I was going to say, speaking of like teams that should be spending and kind of haven't, especially on the offensive side, the Mariners, and I don't think they're going to do it. I'm sure we'll see him go somewhere else. They should do everything in their power to retain this guy.
Yeah.
You have like clearly there's a visual issue here. And what's funny is there's been visual issues with Seattle going back to, 20 years ago. And then they put this incredible batter's eye in, I think whether it was like the old ballpark or whatever, the way it was set up. And it apparently made it very easy to see. But there's clearly something at hand here that's making people strike out at a way more ridiculous clip in Seattle. But you have a guy that is not, he strikes out, but like it's not that far off of the regular numbers at T-Mobile.
Yeah.
Like, this is a dude that absolutely mashes behind the dish, strikes out at it seems high, not that far off from the stadium averages there. And not only is he a phenomenal defender, but he's probably your best power bat. He is your best power bat.
Yeah.
The fact that you have your best power bat as a catcher should make it so much easier to address other spots. You don't need a first baseman to be a top five masher at first base. You just need him to be above average offensively there. Those premium power positions don't need to be elite. They just could be solid for premium power at their spot because you have a catcher who has hit 64 home runs over the last 2 seasons where nobody can hit.
It's funny, man. Like, you could make the argument that their three best offensive positions are catcher, center field, and shortstop. How nuts is that? Like, no other team in Major League Baseball should be saying that about three positions where defense is the MO here. And I would argue that catcher and center field, we just talked about it with overall defensive run value. Like, you have two elite defenders in Julio and Cal Raleigh, and your two best hitters are your catcher and your center fielder. Go find some immobile juice at first base, man.
It's It's not that hard. It's really like I know the Rangers probably aren't going to trade with you, but just for the sake of argument, like look at the return for Nathaniel Lowe.
Yeah, it was
This
a
team could have
reliever.
used a player like that. Josh Naylor, you could have made that happen, no problem. Like that's what's crazy. So not to derail us here, this is, I think, one of the catchers that I would feel so comfortable adding because even in the years where like, oh no, he hit 211 this season. Okay, but he still hit 30 and he's still going to be an elite defender and he's still going to have 4-win season. This is just such a safe bet to be a good player every single year. And I agree. Like I will take. There's different sides of it, right? You can have the Yiner. If Yiner was a premium defender, but I'm just talking about. Oh, let's Moreno's probably a better example.
Yeah,
You can have the Moreno way of just spraying balls in play, and you're going to hit for average. But I think the margin for error for Moreno is slimmer, where it's this guy's going to get his, he's going to walk and he's going to get his, and the defense is always going to carry. Whereas the contact oriented guy, where the defense is always going to carry, it's a little bit harder to climb to that 120 WRC plus,
right.
115 WRC plus. This guy's going to just slug to oblivion. And if he plays in another environment, he could catch William Contreras as the best catcher in Major League Baseball.
I'm totally with you. And I prefer, like, say Raleigh and Gabby Moreno had identical WAR outputs. I think you could make the argument that Moreno's game is more exciting because it's spray the ball around the ballpark, let that athleticism really play. But if I'm constructing a team because of that margin for error that you're talking about, I prefer Raleigh. And is that antiquated? Is that why I rank Moreno 13? Maybe. But like, I prefer this to be what my catcher looks like.
Yeah, I do prefer the elite glove, like just mashing home runs. It just seems like it's a little bit more repeatable
Yeah.
through those prime years where, like a little bit more aggressive Yiner Diaz or, a guy that needs to hit 290 like a Gabriel Moreno, it can get a little bit more difficult to get behind. And by the way, just to highlight the numbers, home road for Cal Raleigh, it's not like he's not affected by the home ballpark. He just is able to manage it a little bit better.
Yeah.
201, 314, 351 slash line this past year. That's a 665 OPS at home. That's a 104 WRC plus, by the way. On the road, 29% strikeout rate. On the road, 237, 311, 512. It's an 823 OPS. That's a 129 WRC plus. So, like, if he's playing games in other environments, not Seattle,
Yeah.
he could push to 40 home runs. I'm not saying I want him out of Seattle. I'm saying Seattle should be holding on for dear life because you ain't finding another catcher that's going to hit you 30 in that
Right.
ballpark. No way.
Right. Which begs the question, how good is George Kirby actually?
Yeah. And people like to talk about that, like skewing some of the ballpark factor numbers. That's baked in there.
Yeah.
It's just impossible to hit for whatever reason. I don't know how the sun orients there. I'm pretty sure they hired NASA the first time around to create the like best batter's eye and figure it all out. They need to hire NASA again.
Yeah, dude. Figure it out, man.
Number one, William Contreras. No suspense here. Milwaukee Brewers catcher. Clean sweep across the board as the top catcher in baseball. How couldn't he be? He does everything. Probably one of the most impressive leaps defensively from, hey, don't forget this guy was playing left field for the Atlanta Braves. And probably Alex Anthopoulos is one of the few mistakes he has ever made is misjudging the ability of William Contreras, excuse me, to progress as a defender.
Yeah.
And clearly the Brewers, who are phenomenal at helping their catchers progress, identified a player that could progress. But there was never a question about the bat. And that's why the Braves were running him out in left field and seeing what he can do. And this past year, 155 games, 281, 365, 466 slash line, 23 homers, 92 driven in, 11.5% walk rate, 131 WRC plus, and a 5.4 F4. Also puts in perspective, though, how good Adley Rutschman was his rookie season, right? Where he had a 5.5. But this is the top catcher in the sport because bat-wise, when I talk about like swing mechanics and things like that, this is a guy that I'm looking at as much as anybody, just the way that he moves in the box to try to apply that to what I'm looking at with prospects. He has really figured out what works for him in the box, and you can just see that through the numbers, right? This is a guy that in 2022 struck out 28% of the time. Then finds an earlier move that he repeats better and gets him ready at basically when the pitcher's releasing, and the swing decisions get better and the contact rates get better. And this guy trims his strikeout rate by 7%. For a catcher to do that in his second full season, really impressive. And then he repeats it in 2024 with a 20.5% K rate and ups his walk rate by 1% and hits 6 more homers. Like, this is a guy that keeps getting better every time you check in. Was it as statistically incredible of a defensive season? No, but I do think that there's some variables in there that factor in as well, right? Where you have different pitchers that are throwing to you. You have just a different, like it was a little bit more of a turnstile at points, I think, of guys that you're working with. And a
For
lot of
sure.
the framing side of things goes to beating the ball to the spot and knowing how pitches are going to move and things like that. So I do think that may have affected Contreras a little bit,
Yeah.
but even with a slight minor step backwards defensively, still graded out well above average in that regard. And again, this guy's going to swing it with the best of them now, where you have that really fun blend of hit and power that's
Yeah.
just going to consistently make him a good bat.
Yeah, dude. My favorite query that I did was, he was traded in the 22 to 23 offseason. So 2023 was his first year in Milwaukee. Since he debuted in Milwaukee, so since the start of the 2023 season, he's not only the only 10 win catcher, he's the only 11 win catcher in Major League Baseball. So everybody else is under 10 wins over the last 2 years, except for William Contreras. And he is second, minimum 100 plate appearances, which is not a big grouping whatsoever. He is second in WRC plus among catchers, only to his older brother. The Contrerases are the two best hitting catchers in Major League Baseball over the last 2 years. And like Adrian Del Castillo is the only one above them, and he's got 84 plate appearances.
Yeah, that's wild. I
Yeah.
mean, he hits the living crap out of the ball. 90th percentile exit velocity of 109 miles per hour is outrageous. So people could say, oh, but the ground ball rate. He's in the realm. Like Soto can have a higher ground ball rate through stretches. I'm not comparing
Acuna.
him to Soto, but he's in the realm of when he hits it in the air, it's gone
Yeah.
very often, the home run to fly ball rate. But also when he hits it on the ground, the probability of it getting through is so much higher than other guys because the top 10% of his batted balls are 109 miles per hour and above.
Right.
So he has found this happy medium of, yeah, I might put it on the ground a little bit more, but I'm still going to be able to slug and I'm going to get away with it because it's hard ground balls, it's line drives. And when you got a 50% hard hit rate, think about that,
Yeah.
50%, half of his batted balls are 95 plus.
Yeah.
You're going to get away with a higher ground ball rate. That said, if he trims it down a little bit, just naturally, you don't
Yeah.
want it to come because then guys get lofty and they can swing and miss a little bit more. But if he finds a happy medium even there to take another step, he could hit 30 home runs. And
Yeah.
so like that's the craziest part about him is he's not fully reaching his ceiling. He might just stay here and like I wouldn't blame him. He's in a really good spot. But there is a case to be made like, hey, you could elevate a little bit more and all of a sudden we're looking at 27, 28, 29, 30 home runs. And then it's like, man, he's Cal Raleigh with the hit tool, maybe
Yeah.
a little bit less defense, but that's the best catcher in baseball indefinitely.
Yeah. No, I mean, and the fact he's what, still 26 years old, I want to
He
say?
just turned 27 on Christmas Eve.
Oh, happy belated William Contreras.
Yeah.
Man, yeah. I mean, the fact that he's entering his age 27 season, he could hold this top spot for a long time, dude. And that offensive profile you're talking about, I think it's the same reason that, we've got our concerns about Luis Angel Acuna, right? New York, where, he's got this swing that's geared for ground balls, but he doesn't hit the ball as hard as Ronald. So like Ronald is elite, but Louis, is it going to work like that? Like with William Contreras, he's more similar to the Acuna thing where he just hits the ball so damn hard that it's always going to be good regardless of what happens. So,
That's why I get really annoyed when people just cite BABIP. No,
yeah,
no BABIP is created equal. No two BABIPs are created equal. You can't just say,
no,
"Oh, his BABIP was high, so he's going to regress."
right.
There's so many factors that go into that. How hard you hit the ball, the average hard hit launch angle, like all of those things are going to then factor into the BABIP and make it high. Contreras wasn't even that high, but I think he can sustain it where it was at about 330
Yeah.
because of how hard he hits the ball and still the enough line drives that he's mixing in.
Yep. So again, our top catchers in baseball are four honorable mentions: JT Realmuto of the Phillies, Logan O'Hoppe of the Angels, Ivan Herrera of the Cardinals, Shea Langeliers of the A's. Number 10 was Francisco Alvarez of the Mets. Number 9, Gabby Moreno of the Diamondbacks. Number 8, Salvador Perez of the Kansas City Royals. Number 7, yeah, was Yainer Diaz of the Houston Astros. 6 was Austin Wells of the Yankees. 5, Patrick Bailey of the Giants. 4 was Will Smith of the Dodgers. Adley Rutschman of the Orioles was 3. 2 was Cal Raleigh of the Mariners. And your best catcher in baseball for 2025 is William Contreras of the Milwaukee Brewers. I have a quick last word. This morning I tried the Starbucks falafel pocket. It's a new menu item. It's not very good. It's really dry.
Falafel pocket.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be like interesting. You got a couple of falafel in there, maybe some fresh greens, but it was just like the inside of a falafel in a little pita, and it was not that good. So don't get it.
I wanted to do a whole dive on players by country in Major League Baseball history compared to players by state.
Okay.
But this episode's gone so long, I'm saving that last word for the next time I'm on because it's actually fascinating and there's some historical context to it that I'm excited to get into.
Perfect. You'll do that with Peter. Peter and I will talk to you with first baseman on Wednesday. Every link you need is in the episode description. Enjoy.